We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, Minister. We are running a little late, and we appreciate the fact you had a little difficulty getting here. So, appearing before the committee today, pursuant to order reference of Tuesday, May 10th, on Bill C-15, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 2016, and other measures. So, welcome, Minister Morneau, Minister of Finance, and with the Minister is Andrew Marsland, who's the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Tax Policy Branch, Martha Morgan, Associate Deputy Minister, and Nick Leswick. I'm not sure you're titled, Nick, but anyway, welcome all. So, Minister, you have the floor, and we'll go to questions.
Assistant Deputy Minister,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For clarity, Nick Leswick is Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic and Fiscal Policy. And he's really good at his job, too, which is... I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say that I'm pleased to be here today to speak to the distinguished members of the Standing Committee on Finance about Bill C-15 and the investments that our government will make to strengthen the middle class and keep Canada's economy strong and growing for the long term. Je vous remercie, Monsieur.
I wish to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted to be here with you today in order to speak to the distinguished members of the Finance Committee of Bill C-15 and the investments that our government will be making in view of reinforcing the middle class and maintaining sustainable economic growth in Canada.
Bill will enable us to move forward on our ambitious economic agenda designed to strengthen the middle class and ensure long-term growth by making smart, necessary investments in our country's future. It's a plan I was honored to table in the House through our very first budget on March the 22nd. Since that day, I've been telling Canada's story from coast to coast, as well as in the United States, Europe, and most recently at the G7 Finance Ministers meeting in Sendai, Japan. Meetings like this one are a great opportunity to demonstrate Canada's leadership on important international issues and to send the message that Canada is back, that we're engaged, and that we're a global leader. In Japan, at the G20, the IMF spring meetings, on Wall Street, as elsewhere over the last 2 months, people keep telling me the same thing. We really like what you're doing in Canada. Members may have read that the Financial Times called Canada a glimmer of light. The Wall Street Journal called Canada the poster child for the International Monetary Fund's global growth strategy, and Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, praised our approach. Our budget earned these endorsements because I firmly believe our government is focused on exactly the right things. And it's answered the call of millions of Canadians who've told us, both before the budget and after, that they want real change. Even before the budget, our government set to work to create the conditions that help middle-class Canadians and their families. On December 7th, 2015, we took a significant first step to strengthen the middle class by cutting taxes for nearly 9 million Canadians. In addition to the tax cut, we introduced the new Canada Child Benefit in Budget 2016. This benefit is intended to help parents better support their most precious resource, their children. The Canada Child Benefit is a simpler, more generous, tax-free benefit for Canadians. It's also better targeted to those who need it most than the previously existing child benefits. It's estimated that about 300,000 fewer children would be living in poverty in 2016-2017 fiscal year compared with 2014-2015 fiscal year once the Canada Child Benefit is in place. This means that families will have extra funds to help them afford cleats for their kids playing soccer or to attend summer camp. It means the increased likelihood of the numerous little things that make summer and childhood the carefree, refreshing time that it's meant to be. This is a tangible measure that gives families across this country options that they may not have had before. It represents the most significant social policy in a generation. But this isn't the only significant social policy within the pages of this budget implementation bill. Equally important are those that help our most vulnerable citizens find renewed support for the unique challenges that they may face. There are three broad areas in this bill that reflect our actions in this regard. The first is seniors. Canada's retirement income system has been successful at reducing the incidence of poverty among Canadian seniors. However, some seniors continue to be at a heightened risk of living in a low-income situation. The budget will help Canadians retire with security and dignity by making significant new investments that support them in their retirement years. These include resetting the age of eligibility for old age security and guaranteed income supplement benefits to 67 from 65, and allowance benefits from 60 to 62 over the 2023 to 2029 period. The passage of the bill will also increase the guaranteed income supplement top-up benefit by up to $947 annually for the most vulnerable single seniors, starting in July 2016. The second area deals with Canadians who've fallen on harder times through a loss of employment. Le budget aidera les Canadiens.
Our budget will help Canadians retire with economic security and dignity thanks to new sizable investments that will support them throughout their retirement. These investments include the reestablishment of the age of eligibility for the guaranteed income supplement to 65 years instead of 67, and people will be eligible for assistance as of 60, the age of 60, as opposed to 62, as of 2023-24. This will increase the guaranteed income supplement, bringing it to $947 annually for seniors living alone who are the most vulnerable as of July 2016. The second aspect involves Canadians who have experienced difficulties because of job losses.
Action to enhance the employment insurance program so that out-of-work Canadians have the support they need while they look for their next job. I'd particularly like to highlight that passage of the bill will extend EI regular benefits by 5 weeks to all eligible claimants in regions of the country that have experienced the sharpest and most severe increases in unemployment. It will also extend employment insurance regular benefits by up to an additional 20 weeks for long-tenured workers in those regions. I'd like to highlight another area where we'll provide much-needed support: veterans. We'll give back to those who've given so much in service to our country. Some $1.6 billion over 5 years will flow directly to veterans and their families in the form of higher direct payments. These enhancements deliver on mandate commitments and respond to recommendations from key stakeholders, including the Veterans Ombudsman. Budget 2016 is about supporting the middle class now through helping Canadian families. It will continue to do so in the future by laying the foundation for long-term economic growth. Canada's population is aging. The global economy is volatile. Oil prices are, of course, unpredictable. We need to take steps to improve competitiveness and productivity in Canada so that we become drivers of our own success now and in a generation from now. We need to ensure that the steps we take now will help our kids and our grandkids. The budget signals a number of areas known to do just that. The largest are in the important areas of infrastructure and innovation. Our $120 billion 10-year infrastructure plan and our innovation agenda will be articulated over the coming year. Once in place, they'll deliver a long-term boost to the Canadian economy. They'll create good jobs now and in the future. Investments in public transit will also help mom and dad to get to work on time. Investments in green infrastructure will help to keep our water clean. And investments in housing will help entire communities to thrive. Investments in and a commitment to a more innovative economy mean jobs after graduation, a cleaner resource sector, and a strong Canadian presence for the world stage. Infrastructure and innovation are just part of the underlying objective of the 2016 budget. This objective is the development of a robust growth strategy to create the conditions for long-term, sustained, and inclusive growth for the middle class and those working hard to join it. This is a multi-dimensional task, one that brings together a number of growth-related initiatives going on inside government and outside government. It's also a team effort. I'm proud to be working with my cabinet colleagues, including Ministers Freeland, Baines, Sohi, and Mahaichuk, on delivering this agenda. We know that we don't have all the answers. We're open to innovative new ideas. As we look to a long-term growth strategy, we know we have to find ways to do things differently. Just a few weeks ago, I hosted the inaugural meeting of the new Advisory Council on Economic Growth to advise the government on key elements of our strategy. It was the first step toward figuring out what Canada will need to create and sustain long-term economic growth that benefits the middle class and those working hard to join it. Il y a quelques semaines à peine, j'ai organisé.
A few weeks ago, I hosted the first meeting of the new Advisory Committee on Economic Growth so as to advise the government on key elements of our strategy. It is a first step in order to define what Canada will need to create and maintain sustainable economic growth, growth that will benefit the middle class and help those who are working hard to join its ranks.
Been tasked with finding the solutions to some of our biggest challenges, things like how to transform innovative ideas into high-value goods and services that will help Canadians and Canadian businesses, how to ensure that the historic investments in infrastructure make it easier for Canadians to get to work on time or get their products to market, and what things can be done today so that Canadians can take advantage of the job opportunities of tomorrow. I expect that Budget 2017 will become the blueprint for this next chapter of Canada's economic growth, and another step towards ensuring that when you have an economy that works for the middle class, you have a country that works for everyone. By working together, we can ensure all Canadians continue to enjoy a high and rising standard of living. Mr. Chairman, it's been a highlight and honor to be able to promote our government's vision. I know we all believe that Canada is a place of opportunities where people can dream of a future in which their children can thrive and succeed. Through our budget, we're making investments that will leave Canada, our middle class, our cities, and our economy better off. We promised real change. We owe it to Canadians to make it happen. Mr. Chair, I look forward to working with members of this committee, Parliament, and all Canadians as we implement our plan and position Canada for a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and we'll go to 5-minute rounds to get more people in. Mr. McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you to the officials who've accompanied you here today. One of the highlights of this budget was the reestablishment of intergenerational fairness in the Canada pension system, bringing the age of eligibility back down to 65, the age at which one can benefit from the system. Might you comment on what the impact of this will be? Is it going to be a durable change? Is the fund healthy? And overall, what will the impact of this change in the age of eligibility be? Bring it back to 65. Thank you for the question. I know that for Canadians, it is difficult for some of them to have enough money for their retirement. This is especially the case for people in the middle class and those who don't have an employer-sponsored pension plan. So for us, it is important to have a solution that will work for people who will be encountering difficulties in the future. We know that this is possible. It is not very difficult for us in a country as rich as Canada is to have a retirement system that is able to help those in need. And this is why we decided that these changes were required, bringing the age of eligibility back to 65, from 67 under the previous government, back down to 65. And we know that it's possible to do this without creating any major roadblocks for the economy. This is a fairness budget, that's how I call it. So the Canada Child Benefit, as you stated, was a great step forward in the social policies of the country. We also know that families come in all shapes and sizes in today's world. And unfortunately, in cases of divorce or separation, there are issues. We met with officials who appeared before us, and we discussed how the government will proceed in this regard to better share benefits eventually between parents who unfortunately have experienced a separation or a divorce. Might you explain to us generally, in general terms, what you've done to ensure that parents with children also benefit from this allowance?
Let me start by saying the Canada Child Benefit is intended to help families, and it does exactly that. So for 9 out of 10 Canadian families with children, it's going to put them in a better situation. For families that are single families with children, it will put them in a better situation. So as a starting point, we're actually providing more money for families. So the examples that we often use are, first of all, on average for those 9 out of 10 families, they'll have $2,300 more. And for the woman earning $30,000 with one child under 6, she'll get $6,400 more. So getting more money, in our estimation, is a very positive thing for families that are struggling to raise their children. I guess the more direct way to answer your question is that the design of the Canada Child Benefit is exactly the same as the Canada Child Tax Benefit, which it's replacing. So there is really no change in this regard. So given that there's no change, we don't believe that this is an area of significant discussion. It will not be included in income and will not affect child support payments for divorced parents. We want that to be clear to Canadians who are trying to evaluate their newfound and better situation, because we recognize that this is of importance to them. This will be a benefit that will be significantly better for, as I said, a very large percentage of Canadians, and we're very pleased with this change.
Time for a very small one.
Je vous félicite d'avoir juste.
Congratulations for having ensured that this is not taxable, neither federally nor provincially. So another advantage for Canadian families. I would like to conclude by discussing growth. You said that 2016 leading to 2017 will be a process of assessment of growth possibilities, opportunities. Might you share with us your observations with regard to various fields, innovation or other, that we will have to deal with to find solutions in order to increase the pace of growth for Canada? Thank you. We know that our economic growth level over the last decade was too low for the future of Canada. It was lower than in the previous decade. We know that with the demographic challenges, it is important to invest in growth. In our budget, we explained Phase 1 of our infrastructure program, which is going to help the economy be more efficient in the future. And in this way, we introduced about $11.5 and $14.9 billion worth of investment for 2016-17 and 2017-18 with our infrastructure program. This will improve with the addition of our other measures. We're aiming for growth of 0.5% this year and 1% next year. That's just a beginning, and that's very important. Also, you asked me what other measures we might take. We have decided to allocate $800 million to our innovation program. This money will be used over the course of the next 4 years in order to create networks and clusters to increase opportunities for a more dynamic economy in the future. In both cases, for both infrastructure and innovation, we will have much more to say during the course of the year because phase 2 of our infrastructure program is coming up with new measures, and I'm presently working with the Economic Growth Council.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to start off with the child care benefit that my colleague ended off on. Minister, I'm a little bit concerned by what I see as crosstalk in what you said. So you started by telling us that the child care benefit was much better than what we had in the past, much more lucrative, much more rich. But then you said the reasoning by which that you didn't do any extra consultation on the federal child care or child support guidelines is because there wasn't any significance in the increase. So can you tell me which is it? Is it a significant change or is it not a significant change? And if it is a significant change, why did you not consult with the Canadian Bar Associations or interested groups, either formally or informally?
Well, thank you for the question, and either I misspoke or you misheard. In fact, what I believe I said was that the benefit is a very significant change for Canadians.
Right.
It's an enormous change in terms of the outcomes for Canadian families. 9 out of 10 families with children will have on average $2,300 more per year. That's a significant amount for families. For low-income families, they will be in a significantly better position. When I was referring to the design of the program, what I was specifically referring to is that the tax situation is not going to be different. So the CCB will not be included in income, which is the same situation as the Canada Child Tax
Right.
Benefit. So it will not affect child support payments for divorced parents. That's important, and we want to be very clear so that people are not in any way confused, because it's quite important for them to understand this is a positive thing for them and will not in any way impact those child support payments.
I understand,
and
Minister.
that's positive.
And you would understand as well, too, that there's two parts to the relationship, those who receive and those who pay. And those who are paying may have a different point of view as to whether or not it's a fair way to approach this lucrative and increased amount on the child care benefit. I'm going to ask you a few questions, Minister, if I could, about what you said about Canada being back, because I do find it interesting. You did go to the G7, you did go to the G20, and you specifically talked about at those two places the importance of stimulus, but I was more taken with what your German counterpart said, and he said that high nervousness in financial markets are fostered by huge government debt and excess liquidity is apparent, and that he stressed the need to reduce deficits and debt. I'm wondering if you have a comment on what other things your German counterpart might have said about your approach.
Well, let me start by saying I think it's important to be responsible when we sit in the House and we talk to Canadians, and I want to again make sure that Canadians understand that with respect to the Canada Child Benefit, it will not be included in income and will not affect child support payments for divorced parents. The program is better for Canadian families. It helps those families who actually need money to raise their children. I was proud to represent Canada at the G7, and I can say to you that at the G7 meeting, we had an open and frank discussion among the countries there. There was not consensus, but unanimity in the fact that we should all be focusing on growth. The challenges to growth to the global economy are significant. We've seen a decline in the opportunities in some of the emerging economies around the world. We've seen a greater level of volatility in growth. We all agreed that in each country's specific situation, they should take whatever measures are most appropriate. We identified 3 different areas that countries might want to focus on: structural reform efforts, monetary policy, and fiscal policy. And we recognize that different countries are in different positions from which to take those different measures. Canada, as it turns out, happily for our country, is in the best net debt to GDP position of all G7 countries. So we are in the best position to make fiscal investments. As you probably know, back in the 1990s, our net debt to GDP was reduced dramatically under the Chrétien and Martin governments. That puts us in a position where we can make those kinds of investments. So I will tell you that the kinds of investments that we're making, which were fiscal fiscal investments are appropriate for us. And what I know that the members around the G7 table would understand is that those are the kinds of things we should be doing with our fiscal position. And they are, by the way, similar to what's being taken in 6 out of the 7 G7 countries.
Mr. Minister, President Obama also said on the fringes of this conference that the G7 leaders were committed to completing the TPP agreement by the end of the year. I do note in this document that there's no help for dairy farmers should this come to light. Do you have some kind of contingency put aside for this?
We, as I know you've heard us say, are committed to free trade. We believe that it's important that Canadians have a role in consideration of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's for that reason that we've been out consulting with Canadians on their views. Those discussions are ongoing, and we think that they've been very fruitful. We will, as we move forward in those discussions, listen to Canadians, and only at a later stage will we consider whether and how any decisions would be taken in response to that TPP deal. As it's not yet ratified, we do not have any sort of contingency in our budget in that regard.
Thank you. Minister, I noticed in the newspaper this morning that you're going to be convening or attending a meeting with the provincial ministers regarding increases to CPP. You mentioned that there was a country that is looking at stimulus spending. That, of course, is Japan. Are you concerned about increasing taxes having the same effect that it had in Japan when it did it in April 2014, which is to actually drive that country into a recession and coupled with the deficit spending that it undertook at that point in time?
Well, let me step back and say that we believe that enabling Canadians to retire in dignity is important. We recognize that with the decline in the number and participation in defined benefit plans across the country, as well as the emerging challenge of new companies that don't take those kind of plans, that many Canadians are not in programs that will allow them to have a retirement up to their expectations. So it's in that regard that we've committed to enhancing the Canada Pension Plan. We began that work in December. I'm looking forward to working in June together with the provinces to see if we can move forward on that. And I want to be very clear here that we are not considering anything that would ever be called payroll taxes. What we're considering is putting in place an enhanced Canada Pension Plan, which would allow investments in the future retirement of Canadians. And that is something that, that will improve their situation in the future and help our economy to be more successful. We think it's the right thing to do for Canadians of tomorrow to make sure they have an appropriate retirement possibility.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Caron, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, and welcome. I'd like to talk about employment insurance with you. As you know, in the bill, the government decided to choose 12 regions that will qualify for an extension of employment insurance benefits. According to the definition provided, these regions include those where the unemployment rate increased by 2% over 3 months without showing any signs, significant signs of recovery. I'm not going to name the 12 regions, but the southern interior of BC, the southern Saskatchewan and Edmonton qualify now. According to the numbers that we've seen, we see that Thunder Bay, Yellowknife, and Regina and PEI might qualify shortly based on the data that's been published. First question, do you plan on adding each of these regions one by one in the bill? Because the list is provided in the bill, if such is the case, and even if it is not. Do you not think that this way of proceeding is relatively ineffective because you change the law as the data flows from Statistics Canada?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. As you know, we have made several changes for the employment insurance system with our budget. We began with improvements for new entrants and re-entrants. We also changed the system. People are eligible after 1 week now and no longer 2 weeks. These changes apply throughout the country. As you stated, we decided to have temporary measures to improve the situation in those regions of the country where there are immediate changes, a 2% increase in the unemployment rate. And to the 12, we added an additional 3 regions that are now eligible. We also made definitive changes to the employment insurance system. So we have changes for the system overall and changes for the 15 regions. So what you're saying is that if these 4 other regions I mentioned, if they qualify under the definition, they won't be included in the extension, the 5-week extension program. Is that the case? Yes. Very well. Professor Trevor Toom mentioned, and I'll say this in English, I have the quote in English.
Amount of time is the second criteria is that you can't show significant signs of recovery. How we interpret sustain or significant, that is what is up for grabs. Et ça fait référence aux conditions.
And he's referring here to the conditions. You're saying.
En fait, sur la qualification.
So this applies to the extension. It's how he qualifies it when he says that the unemployment rate would increase by 2% over 3 months without showing any signs of significant growth. So he's saying that it's an arbitrary definition. How can you qualify or state that there are significant signs of recovery? Do you not think that the bill should include characteristics that are more direct, less ambiguous?
Since part of it was in English, I'll take the liberty of answering in English. We think that the measures were appropriate. We have parts of the country who are experiencing sharp and sustained changes in their situation. The regions that we've chosen are the ones that have had the most significant changes in unemployment. We at the same time recognize that employment insurance is helpful for many other parts of the country, and that's why we've made some changes to allow people to get into the system more rapidly. And I think, as you know, we've also made some changes in the amount of money we're putting in for training so that people, once they get into the system, can also get more access to training dollars. So, we think these are the right measures to take. We think they're the right measures to take at a time where we're experiencing regional differences in our economic situation, with some regions experiencing positive situation and some regions, as a result, largely but not exclusively of changes in the price of oil, experiencing difficult situations. Our view is that we've made significant differences by taking these approaches, and that the other things that we're doing, which I would encourage you to consider, things like lowering taxes for Canadians, things like adding the Canada Child Benefit, which will make a very big increase in especially those that are the least well off in our society, will have a measurable impact on their ability to cope at this time. And finally, and not least, the investments that we're making for the long term will allow us to, we hope and expect, have a more effective long-term growth rate, which will help people in the future.
J'ai une autre question sur l'assurance emploi.
Another question pertaining to employment insurance. I come from Eastern Quebec. Just like the Atlantic region, we have an economy that is based on mostly seasonal jobs. Previously, people were eligible for 5 extra weeks under the pilot project to fill the gap between the end of the payments and the end of one's job, 13, 14, 15 weeks. This was removed by the Conservatives. Now we're seeing the program reestablished, but under different criteria. And the seasonal workers are being left aside. Do you have any measures in mind for these regions that depend mostly on seasonal work. Correct me if I'm mistaken, I don't see any measures targeting these regions. And if so, why haven't you addressed this situation?
In the previous answer, the change from 2 weeks eligibility to 1 week eligibility applies to people going into the employment insurance system across the country, irrespective of what region they're in. So in the regions that you're referring to in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, that change applies to them as well. So we think that's an important measure because that will allow them to get in the system more rapidly, and it will allow them to the extent they want to do retraining or training for another job, allow them to start doing that training more rapidly. So one of the things that we're concerned with is that we don't have people unemployed for long periods of time because they lose their skills. And that's why training and retraining is so critically important. And that said, I'll come back to, again, the other measures in our budget, especially for those people who are seasonal workers who might be trying to raise a family on low incomes. The Canada Child Benefit will be of material impact, positive impact for their families. The reduction in taxes is likely to apply to a significant percentage of those families. And in total, we think that we've provided a situation where not only will they be able to deal with their challenge of being a seasonal worker, but they'll also be able to have more income so they can raise their families in this challenging situation.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Sabera, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister, and thank you for your comments and your continuing leadership. I have to admit, I found your comments on the innovation and infrastructure side refreshing. Frankly, the ability to move people, goods, services, and information from both rural and urban Canada to where they need to be is crucial for our long-term prosperity. And also on the innovation front, we need to be part of those ecosystems that exist and form every day. Those are where the high quality, high-paying jobs. So we are going in the right direction. And I'm glad to be part of a government that recognizes that. What I would like to ask is more of a broad-based question. I've called Bill C-15 the blueprint after the budget. And what I would like to know is how this begins a major step forward to enhance Canada's long-term growth profile, strengthen our middle class while doing it in a fiscally prudent manner. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I can spend a minute focusing on our innovation agenda because I think as we think about what we need to do long-term in order to be more effective, it will be about creating a more productive and effective economy. So as I mentioned, we put $800 million in the budget over 4 years to focus on innovation. And as you know, I appointed an economic advisory council to look at how we can focus on growth. So that will be an important cornerstone of what we hope to achieve for the future of our country. We started in the budget with a focus on research and universities. So by deciding to put $2 billion against universities and specifically around innovation and research at universities, we know that helps them to tool up and to actually build the capacity to help with research and innovation. We then also recognize that the only way that we're going to be effective as a more innovative economy is if we have the kind of quality students coming out of our universities that we need. And we recognize that for many families, especially low-income and middle-income families, university tuition is a challenge. So we changed the university grants system so that they would have a much improved situation, moving it from $2,000 to $3,000 for the lowest income Canadians, which will help 250,000 low-income Canadians. So building blocks, helping students, universities around research, and now looking at what we can specifically do around our innovation agenda, both in terms of the enablers for networks and clusters, so considering whether there are measures that we can take that will actually enable us to be more effective, and specifically considering whether we should be targeting how we create the opportunities in regions and in sectors to make a real difference. That's what I'm working together with our advisory council on doing, and looking forward to making a good long-term difference for the country.
And something more sort of specific and maybe a little more obtuse. Bill C-15 deals with bank recapitalization, and I was wondering if you can offer a few comments on how the specific measures in the bill continue to strengthen and go along the path of strengthening our banking system while ensuring that depositors remain protected?
I can. One of the great exports we have in this country is the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, who's also the chair of the Financial Stability Board internationally, that's recommended bail-in procedures for systemically important banks around the world. So other countries have moved forward in this regard. The United States has moved forward. The United Kingdom's moved forward. I believe most of the EU has moved forward as well. And we've moved forward now on the bail-in regime. What it's intended to do is, in the very unlikely situation that a Canadian bank is finding itself on uncertain footing, we want to ensure that depositors are not in a position of jeopardy. So what it does is it protects depositors by allowing for long-term debt to be turned into equity, so that the long-term debt getting turned into equity, right? So that they can be protected in the case of a difficult situation. And what it does is it ensures that depositors are not in any way put in jeopardy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Both. What's your time frame like, Mr. Minister? We have. I just want to know how much time we get left, and then we can divide it by the numbers and get everybody's question in.
Well, I was planning on being here for an hour, and
Okay.
I know I was a little late, so
All right,
if other people are able to stay for the whole
we'll
hour,
give
I
you-
am.
We'll cut each person back to about 4 minutes. Phil, you got less. Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chair, we're on second round and they just up 5 and I'm getting 4.
No. He was in the first round. He should have got 7.
Thank you for being here, Minister. I'm concerned for small business in a lot of ways. It's my heritage, what I did before this place. It's on the record that your government promised to go ahead with the small business tax reductions during the campaign. Is it fair to have broken that promises to small businesses?
Well, thanks for the question. We absolutely recognize that small business is a very important part of our economy, that we have a very large number of small businesses across the country, that we have a large number of people employed by small businesses, and we see the critical importance of encouraging small businesses to start and maintain their success. We looked at the measures that we thought were most likely to be effective in both ensuring tax fairness in our country and ensuring that that small businesses could be successful. In our estimation, having a healthy and strong customer class is critically important for small businesses. Small businesses, in order to be successful, need to have the ability to sell their services or products to, in most cases, Canadians. And for that, we know that reducing taxes on Canadians, that providing more money for Canadians through the Canada Child Benefit will put them in a better family situation, more able to buy the products and services provided by small business, and in our estimation will be positive not only for the economy with a stronger growth rate, which will support small businesses, but will be specifically better for each family so they can actually be better purchased.
I can debate that. I don't have the time to debate it with you, but as a previous small business owner, with the incentive of hiring an employee, an extra employee, where we might have had 10 employees, we could get that 11th employee to grow our business, pay more taxes, have people off of other programs who were a drain on the government, is something that's gone as well. But let me just go to, we had the Canadian Convenience Store Association appear earlier this month, and they said they were told by someone in finance that small business tax cut would be implemented in 2017. Did anyone in your department tell them that?
No.
Okay. So is the reduction from 10.5 to 9% deferred, or is it canceled indefinitely?
Well, as we said in our budget, that we moved forward on the change from 11% down to 10.5%, and we have, at this stage, deferred any further change in the small business tax rate.
So deferred versus canceled indefinitely. Is there, if it's deferred, what year is it deferred to?
I have no further information at this time to answer that question. We've decided that at this stage it's deferred, and if there's future information to be provided, we will certainly provide it to you.
Okay, I'll take that as the other one, that it's canceled indefinitely. Now, Canadians deserve to know what they're getting for the massive borrowing and debt that your government's moving forward with. You did not, or it was refused to release the detailed 5-year cost estimates initially, and then they were released based on the PBO coming forward. I'd like to read you a quote that the PBO said to this committee when they were here. And it's about releasing the models that is critical for the proper oversight of the budget. And it says...
Sorry, could I ask you to start that quote again? I apologize.
Sure. I wasn't at the quote yet, but here's what he said. I'll go right to the quote. I would like to say that the use of models and multipliers is more a question of judgment than details. How can we evaluate your judgment if you refuse to tell us how you came up with your economic and job projections in the budget? So this is about job projections, and they would like to know the models that and multipliers you used, which they're not able to get from your department.
Well, let me start by saying, we're pleased to work together with the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And in the case where they asked us for more information, we provided it within a week. So in my estimation, that's appropriate and what we did. In our budget, we were able to show that, in our estimation, the measures that we put in for this fiscal year would increase jobs by 43,000, and in the next fiscal year would increase jobs by 100,000. That would grow the economy by 0.5% this year and an additional 1% next year. What I do know is that the PBO, when they came out, acknowledged that our budget efforts would grow the economy and increase employment in this year and next year. So the fact that there's some differences between those economic estimates is to be expected, because people will come up with their estimates differently. But the consensus between those two estimates is that they will help us to grow the economy.
Are you prepared to share your models with them?
You're well over time, Phil. Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. I want to actually go back to the question that my colleague raised in regards to CPP and understanding that you do have a meeting coming up with your counterparts provincially. And specifically, we heard some testimony from one witness in particular talking about how there isn't a dire situation for seniors and retirees in this country. However, certainly in my riding, where we're predominantly middle class, quite comfortable, very lucky, I would say. But when people in my community tend to retire, they tend to then struggle and have to make choices between medication or food, because pensions have not increased, but cost of things, everyday things like hydro, water, property taxes all tend to go up. So in terms of CPP and moving forward with the provinces, what is your take, or what is the department's take in terms of the conditions and situations that seniors are facing in this country?
Well, it's important to not be too dramatic on this subject. We've had a good situation in helping seniors over the last generation in retirement in Canada. So if we go back to the 1960s, the situation for seniors in this country was very difficult. We had, for women, very high levels of poverty, and very high, like over 60%, and for men, over 50% levels of poverty. So a very difficult situation. The actions taken at that time around the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the Old Age Security, and the Canada Pension Plan made a difference. So they made a real difference, so that Canada now has a much lower level of senior poverty. So the actions worked. Taking action in advance by putting those programs in place had a long-term impact that made a real difference. And that's where we find ourselves today, where we're looking at the situation that we're in with a continuing level of senior poverty. Not nearly as high. It's more like in the 6 or 7% zone, but one that could get more troubling in future for two reasons. First of all, there's lower pension plan coverage, and second of all, people are living longer, so they actually have to make the amount that they have stretch out longer. So in that situation, we want to make sure that we take actions today that are going to help people over the long term. So we are very focused not only on the current situation, but the future situation. The decisions we make today, I think, will leave a legacy for our children and our grandchildren and ensure that they find themselves in a better situation when they turn to retire than they might be otherwise. And it's for that reason that I'm personally committed and our government's committed to enhancing the Canada Pension Plan in a fully funded way that will enable people to have a more secure retirement in the long term. And that, I think, is the responsible thing for us to do. It will mean that the people that are doing well today can feel that they've got their next generation to be in as good a situation that they are in today, and it will leave us to continue to work on ensuring that we reduce elderly poverty, in the next few years, but also in the long term through these measures.
Thank you. And moving a little bit, I recently attended the Council of Europe as a Canadian delegation, and one of the urgent debates or current topic debates was the Panama Papers, and in particular speaking about international trade agreements, for example, with other countries, and how the European parliaments and governments need to look at countries who are doing more to deal with tax avoidance and tax evasion. And given the investment in budget 2016 for just that, are you hearing on the international, in the international community in terms of Canada leading the way to deal with this so that we become a good global partner on dealing with, countries who are basically benefiting from avoidance of nationals paying taxes in their own countries?
Well, thanks. I think maybe the way to think about this might be in two separate buckets. In our budget, we allocated $444 million for the Canada Revenue Agency. Those funds are really intended to allow the Canada Revenue Agency to do better at collecting payments that are actually due from Canadians, to ensure that we have people paying their fair share in our country. At the G20, there's a number of initiatives that people are working on, and we are an active and a full participant in those discussions around ensuring that global tax situations are making sure people pay revenue where they should be pay taxes where they should be paying taxes. So there's an initiative called base erosion and profit shifting, where we're part of that, which is trying to ensure that companies in particular don't gain their revenue and profits in one jurisdiction but shift it to another place, which is lower taxation jurisdiction. We're working as a participant there. There's another initiative around common reporting standards, so trying to ensure that people actually report that we have access to know where people are actually moving their money from, and that we report that in an efficient way. And we will also be working on ensuring that we find ways to know who actually owns things in countries, beneficial ownership, so that we have a better sense of who owns entities, so that we can find our way to ensuring that the actual owners pay the actual taxes that are due.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Leipert.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Minister and staff, thank you for being here. It's going to be an awfully long evening for all of us, and I can tell you it's longer there than it is going to be for each one of us individually. I only have really one question, but I wanted to get a little clarity first from Mr. McKinnon's first question around the change in age from 65 to 67 and then 67 to 65. I think Mr. McKinnon seemed to indicate that we were talking about CPP, when in fact I think we're only talking about OAS, are we not?
I can't put words in Mr. McKinnon's mouth.
Well, the reason I say that is because he mentioned something about the stability of the fund. Really, right. We're only talking about stability of the fund being the federal treasury, because that's where OAS comes from. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, fine. I just want to get that clear. My question is this, and it's from a constituent of mine who is a former pension plan manager, who writes to me and says, this government talks a lot about making decisions based on evidence and scientific data, yet the finance minister, before being elected, authored a book called The Real Retirement, which contained a compelling analysis of the adequacy and stability of the Canadian pension system, advocating for the retirement age increase from 65 to 67. If you ever get the opportunity to ask the finance minister why he is now doing something different than he advocated for before being elected, what should I tell him?
That's working for you, constituents. Go ahead, Minister.
Well, maybe first I can ask you to tell your constituent that I'm happy he or she bought the book.
Maybe not. Might have got it from the library. I don't know.
Okay. In the book, which I co-wrote with a colleague, we identify the fact that with an aging population, that we will have demographic challenges. We identify the fact that some Canadians will be able to work longer, and we also identify the fact that some Canadians won't be able to work longer, which is a function of the different jobs that Canadians have. The approach taken to changing the old age security by the previous government, which in my estimation was arbitrary, so it was a decision taken without consultation to move the age of retirement from 67 back to 65, or from 65 up to 67, jeopardized the retirement possibilities for many Canadians that would have been relying on old age security, and it did it in a way that did not have any sort of consultation or any sort of process that would have led them to conclude that that was about to happen. We don't like that approach. We believe that we move that back to 65 because we don't want to do something in that sort of way. We recognize that the old age security system for Canadians that are lower income in particular is an important pillar of the retirement system. We are of the view that this is going to help a significant number of Canadians that can't work past 65 because they're in jobs that don't allow them to do that. And some other Canadians will be able to work past that, and that's something that we should consider.
One more.
Are you prepared to now consult on that and change your decision? Because I think there's compelling evidence. You don't have to necessarily consult. There's compelling evidence that shows that the cost to the Treasury is going to become very large as we move 10 years out into the system. Is that something you're prepared to consult on and change?
Well, I will say first that I think there's compelling evidence that Canadians in different lines of work, that Canadians of different economic situation have greater or lesser ability to retire later. So by making a draconian step that impacts everyone, you don't recognize that reality. We will continue to work on retirement security for Canadians. Recognizing the importance of considering demographic issues, recognizing the importance of helping Canadians to save in a way that will enable them to retire. And, that's something that we'll continue to do. So you will see, and as you know, this coming month, we're working on the Canada Pension Plan enhancement. You will see us continue to consider this issue because we believe that it will be an ongoing issue of great concern for Canadians as they consider how they can retire when they're living ever longer on savings that are, in many cases, going to be inadequate to that task.
Thank you, Minister. We have two members who haven't had the opportunity to ask questions yet. Mr. Graywell first.
Chair, thank you, Minister, for being here. I really want to focus on what the budget does for young Canadians. As a recent grad, well, not so recent, but not so long out of school, the cost of education is going up every year, especially post-secondary education. And we spoke about innovation and growth, and at the heart of that is ensuring that we have the talent to build our innovation agenda and grow our economy. And education is the single most powerful tool to change your circumstance and contribute to society and the economy. You mentioned earlier about the grants that we're going to be doubling. Can you also please elaborate on how we're going to make it easier for students to manage their debt load because the cost of education is increasing?
So thanks for the question. I think, this is an important issue. I would say the very first way we're going to help students to manage the debt is by helping them not to have as much. So I do have to go back to the student grants. I mean, I think pretty well every student would rather have less debt. So by increasing the grants for low-income students and for middle-income students and for part-time students, will make a material impact on the actual amount of debt they have when they graduate from school. That's step number one. Step number two is we're creating a significantly larger number of summer jobs for students. So again, first you have a higher grant. Second, you actually provide more jobs. So our summer job program will increase by 300,000 the number of jobs for students. So that'll give them more opportunity to earn money during their summers so that they will be able to pay off a portion of their debt. So that's step one. Step two, and then step three is in order to enable them to not have to pay their debt until they get to a reasonable amount of income, we've allowed for, I believe it's up to $25,000. Until a student earns $25,000, they won't have to pay the debt or begin paying the debt, which allows them at least a time period whereas they get their first job or as they get into the first serious long-term employment, they're not burdened with that debt, which will help them to actually get going. So all of these things, I think, are important measures for students. And, of course, investing in universities, investing in innovation is going to help to enable them to gain the skills and find the kinds of jobs that will make a real difference for them long-term, so they'll actually be able to afford to pay off their debt when they actually get into the workforce.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Gray, you got time for one more.
We also spoke about the importance of infrastructure in this budget and how we're going to make historical investments in infrastructure. In previous years, and there's a lot of conversation about shovel-ready and shovel-worthy and the bureaucracy associated with getting money into the ground and making sure that there's a return on investment. Now, the infrastructure minister, Minister Sohi, has said that the P3 review has been the screen for P3 projects has been lifted for some of the projects. Can you elaborate on how that's going to make it more efficient to get money into the ground?
Well, we don't want anyone to take away the idea that we think P3s aren't a very useful way for us to build infrastructure. It's just not necessarily useful in every single situation. So, and we do recognize that it's something that slows down the process of moving forward in infrastructure projects. So to your question, really, which is around the speed of getting to infrastructure projects, I think I can identify a couple of issues because we do want to get to things quickly. In the case of the research and university projects, we had a very short timeline because we knew that many of those projects were ready and willing to go. I believe the timeline's already passed where the submissions have already been submitted to the infrastructure department. So we're getting going quickly on those. In the federal infrastructure that we outlined, we also knew that there were many projects ready and able to go, so those things can get going very rapidly. And by changing in the sharing of infrastructure projects from a third, federal, provincial, municipal to 50-50, we actually create the conditions that allow projects to go forward more rapidly. So those things, together with the not requiring a P3 screen in every situation, will allow us to move forward more rapidly, and we hope get things started that will have a long-term impact on the economy while providing some short-term gains in terms of immediate employment.
Thank you, Minister.
Final question, Mr. Ouellette. Yep.
Would you like to ask a question?
If the committee allows it, I'm very grateful.
I have three questions, but I'll forego those questions.
Each take one, and we don't want to wear out the minister here. He's got a long night ahead of him.
I have lots of questions.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. Mr. Minister, thank you, and I'm surprised by my opportunity to ask a question. I have many. I suppose the one that's very down in the details and one that I'm preparing an amendment for this committee. I'm unhappy that the long-tenured worker definition that came out of the last government has been reinserted now into changes in this budget for employment insurance. So the long-tenured worker definition, which this bill, the Omnibus Budget Bill, brings into the EI Act instead of getting rid of it, will prejudice younger workers and newer workers. And I'm wondering if the government is open to an amendment to Bill C-15 that would allow the long-tenured worker definition to be pulled.
I would be happy to get back to you outside of this committee. I don't have the detail on the long-tenured worker. I can tell you that we believe we've made measures to the EI system that will make significant improvements. And if there's any more that we can say on long-tenured workers, I'll get back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
One short one, Mr. Ouellette, and then we've got everybody covered.
Well, I would have liked more time to talk, but thank you. Now, we often talk about how we're lifting 300,000 children out of poverty in this country through the CCB. And we had in this committee Dr. Evelyn Forget, who testified about the benefits of the guaranteed income for all Canadians. Now, in my estimation, the CCB actually serves as a form of guaranteed income for families. It allows them to make choices as they deem necessary for their own choices in their own lives. Now, will families who are receiving the CCB also be able to receive other benefits like welfare, who are on reserve or off reserve, and without seeing those clawed back by provincial governments? And are you working to ensure that provincial governments aren't going to be clawing those back so that we don't take from one pocket or take from one hand and reduce with the other?
I think there's two separate questions here, actually. I think the first question is around whether the gaining welfare or anything else, whether that will have a clawback provision on the CCB, and the answer is unless their income is so high that they get into the zone where there's a clawback, the answer will be no. And the second part of the question is, will we work together with provinces to ensure that these programs aren't clawed back by provinces? And what I can tell you is that Minister Duclos is working with provinces to ensure that that is not the case, that they don't reduce the amount of money going to people through provincial actions. So
thank you very much, everyone, for their questions, and thank you very much, Minister and officials, for coming. You're about 5 minutes over your hour. We appreciate you answering all the questions. So we will suspend for 3 or 4 minutes and then deal with officials on Divisions 9, 12, and 14, which we didn't get done previously. So suspend it for 5 minutes.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think we'll have to say to, third time, Ms. Martel, is a dream because you've been here 3 times and it looks like you're going to get your say this time. So we're, just for members' information, we're dealing with those divisions and parts of the Budget Implementation Act that there had been questions raised on. And Ms. Martel is here to deal with Division 9 of Part 4, which is the Old Age Security Act. And I think you have a statement to make, and then we'll go to questions. Thank you.
Sure. Bonjour tout le monde. Division 9 of Part 4 of the Budget Implementation Act proposes to amend the Old Age Security Act in 2 ways. First, it increases the Guaranteed Income Supplement top-up by $947 per year for the lowest income single pensioners and for pensioners whose spouse or common law partner is not eligible for old age security benefits. This increase also applies to the top-up of the allowance for the survivor. The change will be effective on July 1st, 2016. It is estimated that close to 900,000 low-income seniors will benefit from this measure at a cost of $669 million in 2017-18, the first full year of implementation. Deuxièmement, il est proposé de rétablir à 60.
Secondly, it is proposed to set at 65 years the age of eligibility for GIS and OAS payments and 60 years for allowance benefits. The Act was amended in 2012 in order to increase the age of eligibility from 65 to 67 years for both GIS and OAS payments, and it moved from 60 to 62 years for benefits. The increase was to be put into place gradually from 2023 to 2029. The cancellation of this increase in the age of eligibility will have no impact on the cost of the Old Age Security Program for 2023.
Martel, wasn't sure whether I caught that. You said 900,000 people would benefit from the top-up?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
To be more accurate, it's 863,000 the first year.
Okay. Thank you. Going to questions then. Does anybody have any questions on the old age security aspect on this division?
Just one quick.
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Leipert.
What's the average monthly benefit of that?
The pension is $570 per month, and the guaranteed income supplement is based on income and marital status. And if you have no income at all and you're living alone, you're a single senior, it can be as high as $773 per month.
No, I'm talking about the average increase.
Oh, sorry, average increase, $775.
Per year?
Per year, correct.
Per person?
Yes. Maximum increase is $947. Single seniors with an income below $4,600 will get the maximum increase, and seniors with an income between $4,600 and roughly $8,400 will get a partial increase, and beyond $8,400 there won't be any increase.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I guess that's clear cut. Third time done. Thank you very much, Ms. Mattel. Thank you. Okay, Division 12, if we could have those witnesses, please.
These are all people who've been...
Yep, been here before 3 times as well. This is the one that Ms. Key was on. Okay, then we're dealing with Division 12 of Part 4, the Employment Insurance Act, and we have Ms. Ryan, who's the Director General, Employment Insurance Policy Skills and Employment Branch, and Ms. Vienne, who's the Director, Policy Analysis and Initiatives, Employment Insurance Branch, Skills and Employments Branch. Welcome. And I believe you have a brief statement, then we'll go to questions. Thank you very much for coming, I guess, the third time, too.
Third time, too.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill proposes to make three essential changes to the Employment Insurance Act. The first of these is to extend extra weeks of benefits for workers in regions affected by the downturn in commodity prices. The second is to eliminate new entrant and re-entrant provisions, and the third is to change the 2-week waiting period to 1 week. So I'll speak to these briefly in turn and then take questions. So on the extension of extra benefits, the EI program provides temporary financial assistance to unemployed workers who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own while they look for employment or upgrade their skills. Dramatic declines in global commodity prices since late 2014 have produced sharp and sustained unemployment shocks in commodity-based regions. Budget 2016 provides that eligible unemployed workers in 12 regions hardest hit by the downturn in commodity prices may receive additional weeks of EI regular benefits. 5 additional weeks of EI regular benefits will be available for all eligible unemployed workers in specified regions, up to a maximum of 50 weeks, and up to an additional 20 weeks will be available to eligible unemployed long-tenured workers in specified regions, up to a maximum of 70 weeks. Extended benefits will be available for a period of 1 year starting in July 2016, with the measure applying to all eligible claimants as of January 4th, 2015. That's the first measure, Mr. Chair. The second measure, the elimination of new entrants, re-entrants, I'll speak to next. So the government is seeking to make amendments to the EI Act and to amend the EI regulations and EI fishing regulations to eliminate the new entrant and re-entrant requirements established for regular claimants and self-employed fishers. Currently, new entrant and re-entrant rules require workers newly entering the labor force or re-entering after an absence of 2 years to accumulate 910 hours of insurable employment in the year preceding their claim to be eligible for employment insurance benefits. The proposed amendments will eliminate the new entrant and re-entrant provisions introduced in 1978 and instead require claimants to meet the regional variable entrance requirement, which varies between 420 and 700 hours, to be eligible for EI regular benefits. Self-employed fishers will need to reach the regional insurable earnings entrance requirements for fishers, which varies from $2,500 and $4,200 to qualify for fishing benefits. The provisions also will allow workers to gain access to EI-funded training supports delivered through labor market development agreements with provinces and territories, as these workers must qualify for Part 1 benefits before qualifying for Part 2. Turning to the third measure, Mr. Chair, the Employment Insurance Act currently requires claimants to serve a waiting period prior to benefits being payable and provides that it may be deferred or waived in specific circumstances. The waiting period has been set at 2 weeks since 1971. These amendments to the EI Act will reduce the waiting period from 2 weeks to 1 week. All claimants whose benefit period commences before the coming into force of these amendments will be subject to the existing 2-week waiting period.
Much, Ms. Ryan. Going to questions just before we start. I have one on the new entrance, re-entrance. You go to the regular insurable hours. That system, though, still works on what the regional. It still varies. It can go up from 420 to 440, etc. It jumps around according to the employment in the region. Am I correct in that?
That's absolutely right, Mr. Chair. So the variable entrance requirements and then the weeks of eligibility are specified as per a table that ranges from 6% and under for unemployment rates, and then has a maximum threshold of 16% and higher, which determine benefits according to how many hours you qualify with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caron. And then Mr. Ouellette.
Oui, j'ai quelques questions.
Yes. Yes, I do have a few questions. Thank you for being here. I would like to really understand the logic with regard to offering an extra 5 weeks based on the calculation. We know that the 5 weeks were offered in regions where the jobless rate was high, where seasonal jobs were frequent. But here we're talking about an increase of 2% of the unemployment rate over the course of 3 months without signs of recovery. 12 regions qualify. That's what we've been told. 3 other regions will be added to the list. Based on the formula put forward, within the next month, 4 new regions might be added. But we've just heard that those 4 regions won't be included. I would like to understand the logic behind this, the thinking that went into this, into these various decisions, because to my mind, it just doesn't hold up, to tell you the truth, especially in eastern Quebec, where there is a crying need to fill the gap and the black hole. Mr. Chairman, I detected 2 questions in your comments. And if it's all right with you, I'll answer in English.
The issue of why extend benefits, and as I understand, sir, the second question would speak to why these regions. So in terms of the why extend benefits and for the 5 weeks. Allez-y.
No, I'm not thinking against the extension of benefits. I understand the rationale. I just wanted to know, actually, the thinking behind the establishment of the formula that was used.
Sure. Okay. So in terms of the formula that was used, it essentially reflects a range of analyses that we were undertaking within the department for a period of months. Following the downturn in commodity prices, we did institute a range of measures to track the EI claims that were essentially coming in the door. So we saw a marked increase in EI claims that started in early 2015. It actually was quite specific. The week after Christmas, there was a large increase in the number of claims. These claims were very localized by province and aligned very closely with any number of other metrics in terms of the demographics of the claims that were coming in the door. Not only were they located in commodities that were heavily dependent, regions that were heavily dependent on commodities, but the claimants themselves showed a marked pattern of professions related to, in the first instance, the oil sector, but commodities. So that was one level of analysis that was done, and we did not see a similar patterns across the country. In terms of the other features that we saw, we did begin to see an increase in exhaustion of benefits that started in September or October of 2015. So essentially, the earlier claimants that were coming into the program, we didn't kind of get a sense that people were having large amounts of difficulties re-entering the workforce, but later in the year it very much increased. So those patterns of both high intake and then high exhaustion were very localized and correlated with any number of other metrics, and specifically the metrics that we use to base the access to the extended benefits. The other, I think, set of most pertinent analysis that we did was parallels to the downturn in 2009, when there was a much more widespread increase in unemployment rates, and that had a pattern of being 2% or more in most parts of the country, essentially.
Aidez-moi à comprendre. Je comprends l'argument.
Help me understand. I understand the argument with regard to commodity prices and the drop, But an increase of 2% of the jobless rate in a region over 3 months, be it because of a drop in commodity prices or for any other reason, it's a problematic situation. Once again, I understand that the drop in commodity prices was one reason, but why limit the extension for that reason? And the second question, why now cut or reduce the list of regions that might be eligible now, instead of taking into account those regions that might qualify based on the criteria in May or June, for example?
For using the specific criteria that we used, it did correlate with other measures, but in the interests of clarity and precision, we did set the specific criteria of the 2% and for a period of 3 months and so on to in hopes of bringing that precision. In terms of your second question, sir, could I ask you to repeat it?
Oui, pourquoi avoir déterminé qu'à partir de
Yes, why determine that as of now, regions that are on the list will remain there, but others that aren't on the list, even though they might qualify, will not be added to the list? This involves the timing issue, because with the extension of benefits, and this began in January 2015.
That tracks a sharp and sustained deterioration in labor markets, and having that access to benefits begin in January of 2015, it would become increasingly less connected to the policy measure that is proposed. In terms of the flexibility that's built into the system that was related to the chair's first question, there remains the ability for the program to adjust to the ongoing changes in economic regions. So to the extent that there are regions that have a change over a period now of almost a year and a half versus the change in commodity prices, that also constitutes less of a sudden increase in unemployment, and it moves away from the policy intent of dealing with those mass layoffs that occurred at a given time. And I think that those two measures, the policy design as well as the idea that we are trying to bring extraordinary measures that target a sharp and sudden deterioration, both speak to timing that gets less direct the further you get away from the period of the downturn.
Mr. Ouellette, you got one more? You can come back. Mr. Ouellette?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, I was just looking at the cost. So over the cost of this program over 2 years is probably around $582 million, I believe. That's what I previously learned.
That's exactly correct.
And these special regions that we're just discussing with Mr. Caron here, what's going to be the overall cost, do you think, of that program?
So I'm happy to speak to that. The costing that we are carrying for the additional 3 regions that the Prime Minister announced would be $214 million in the 2-year period that follows the budget, $241 million over the entire span of the program, because there will be some people that continue to collect benefits into a 3rd year, with administrative costs of $4.4 million. And our estimate is that this will help some 63,500 people.
And sorry, just for my information, how many Canadians receive EI benefits?
In a given year, 1.8 million Canadians receive EI benefits, and 1.3 million receive EI regular benefits.
And that's the annual cost of, what would that be the annual cost of?
Annual cost is right now tracking just short of $16 billion in the combined set of benefits.
Okay. I'd like to go back to, you talked about fisheries and how self-employed workers in the fishery industry can receive EI benefits, which is unusual in that most other people working in other sectors, if you're employed, self-employed, you can't receive that. I was just wondering if you could give a bit more information about how that came about and, for instance, why it doesn't apply to people up north who are hunters. Indigenous people often do a lot of hunting, and I think it would be an interesting extension of benefits for some other different groups in our society.
Okay. It's a wide question, Mr. Chair.
Answer what you can. It came in Romeo LeBlanc's time when he was Minister of Fisheries. I do know that. That'd be Dominic's dad.
So it does date to the 50s, the fishing benefits, and it does target self-employed workers. In recent years, the program has extended employment insurance special benefits to the self-employed, but not the fishing benefits that you described. In terms of why a program wasn't expanded, that's beyond my scope to comment on.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We're always open to political initiatives, Robert. Ms. May, did you want to ask your question on long-tenured workers to these folks?
Mr. Chairman, I would love to, because these are the appropriate
Go ahead,
witnesses
and then we'll
to
come
ask
to
this.
Mr. Caron.
And you were here when I put the question to the minister. So, as you probably know, the Canadian Labour Congress has already raised this in testimony before the committee, being concerned that since the difference between the benefits for a long-tenured worker and others are quite dramatic, there is a concern about why this this particular clause, and of course it's was it Section 207 Sub 1 at the very beginning of Division 12, and why has that been done, and can that be omitted without doing any would actually improve the EI system in my view, but I'll leave it to you to explain it.
Thank you for the question. The definition of long-tenured workers, just to start there, is someone who has contributed at least 30% of the maximum employee contributions into the program in 7 of the last 10 years and has not drawn more than 35 weeks of EI regular benefits in the last 5 years. So this is a definition that was put in place during the 2009 recession and the extraordinary measures that followed. The intent of it has a number of antecedents, if I could put it that way. So to go back to the work that we had been doing in terms of monitoring the increase in claims that we saw and analyzing the essentially the background of the people that were exhausting their benefits, what we saw was that there was a preponderance of people that were exhausting that were long-tenured workers that were 45 years of old and older and had essentially the highest benefit rate amounts weekly check. In terms of past work that we've done and the wider research on that particular age group, there's a wide body of work, in particular in Canada. I'd point to David Gray and Ross Finney at Ottawa U did quite good work in this front, to the effect that for those workers starting at age 45, if they experience a job shock, a job loss, that there are concerning proportions of them that do not work again, and essentially until they can access pension income. So, the claims analysis that we were doing, coupled with the wider research of the difficulties that this group in particular can face in reattaching to the labor market, were considerable reasons for continuing the extension that was granted during the recession, and and I think that there are other considerations such as the degree to which they have also contributed to the program without drawing in the past. It's secondary.
Can we leave it there?
I'll be able to revisit it clause by clause, but but thank you. At least I'll dig out some more information for why I'm worried about it.
Mr. Caron,
Thanks.
and then we have to go to Division 14. Not too much time.
En fait, j'ai deux questions qui me...
I have 2 remaining questions. The first I questioned the minister. I asked if regions where seasonal jobs are very commonplace, well, I asked if we were taking this into account in the bill, and he said the measure targeted everyone with this change in the waiting period from 2 weeks to 1 week. Might you confirm to me if there are any areas of the bill that target regions where seasonal employment is commonplace? Yes, there are two types of measures in the budget. There are measures that will be implemented under the bill, including the wait period. Also, measures for people who go into the marketplace, the job market.
That are in the bill. They have differential impact for seasonal areas. I am quite confident that the analysis of the 1 week waiting period is predominantly, it's relatively of strong benefit to regions with seasonal workers. The new entrant, re-entrant provisions will have their largest, if you will, dollar figure in urban and in urban areas. They're measures that benefit youth and immigrant groups in particular. But these benefits, that measure will also have a relative impact in regions with high rural youth populations. So in particular, the sort of northern regions of Quebec sort of do relatively well in our analysis. In terms of the extended benefits, to the extent that there are seasonal workers in the 12 to 15 regions that will receive the extended benefits, then they would be eligible for the extra 5 weeks, depending on when they qualify.
Thank you. One more?
One more.
In its commitments, the government mentioned that it would like to be able to withdraw or remove the condition of a terminal illness diagnosis for eligibility for unemployment benefits for compassionate reasons. Have you looked at this? It's not included in the bill, but if you've looked at it, could you tell us how much such a program might cost? The budget included a commitment by the government with regard to consultations to inform measures that would be proposed in the context of the 2017 budget. So we have begun to work on this. The question of the cost will be reflected in the decision that we will reach. It's important to be prudent because 8.1 million Canadians are natural caregivers, care for a member of their family at present, and these compassionate care benefits would involve close to 6,000 people every year. So it would change things immensely, and the definition aspect is very important. This work must be done appropriately.
I was expecting great things in the 2017 budget.
Do our best.
Expectations.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you, Ms. Venn, Ms. Ryan. And we'll turn to Division 14, Part 4, Jobs, Growth, and Long-Term Prosperity Act. Thank you very much, ladies. Ms. Smith, name I can understand. Oh, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith and Ms.
Sheehy. Director of Operations Machinery of Government, PCO, and Mr. Smith, Vice President, Risk Administration and Chief Financial Officer and Vice President, Strategy and Organizational Development, PPP Canada Incorporated. Thank you for coming, and you have some remarks, and then we'll go to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the budget, the government committed to ensure that government institutions are aligned to best support infrastructure innovation by transferring responsibility for P3 Canada to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. Currently, P3 is a subsidiary of the Canada Development Investment Corporation, which is a parent crown in the finance portfolio. So created in 2008 by OIC and incorporated under the Canada Business Corporations Act, P3 Canada is a small organization whose mandate relates to two things. First, providing advice on P3 opportunities to the federal government and to others, and managing the P3 fund on behalf of the federal government. So Division 14 of the budget legislation provides for two things to effect the transfer of P3 Canada from the Minister of Finance to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. As required under the FAA, it allows the shares of P3 to be transferred to the Minister of Infrastructure. And second, as is currently the case, the legislation preserves the government's oversight of P3 by authorizing the Governor and Council to amend key business characteristics such as mandate and business restrictions, the selling, disposal of shares or assets, amalgamation or dissolution of the corporation, as well as its agency status in the future. As a parent crown, there needs to be an act of parliament to do this. Previously, it could be done by OIC when it was a subsidiary, or currently it could be done as a subsidiary. So that's a brief overview of the legislation.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Mr. Greywall.
I asked Minister Marneau this as well on the P3 screen. Infrastructure is extremely important in the budget, and getting it to the ground and getting projects going is obviously very important. And my short term in government, I've noticed that everything takes a very long time to get done here. So can you guys speak to how we've said projects over $100 million will they won't have to go through the so-called P3 screen? Can you speak to how that's going to help us get money into the ground quicker?
Sure. Yes, so infrastructure, those are the applicants to the Building Canada Fund within Infrastructure Canada programming. And I think the removal of that screen allows those projects to be considered more fully, more immediately for funding. Our role was to provide advice to Infrastructure Canada with respect to those projects that could be P3s. What we're seeing is that most of the complex, large projects are coming as P3s, and so the screen was really confirmation of how the procuring jurisdiction wanted to procure that asset.
Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. McKinnon. Then Mr. Caron.
Donc, si je comprends bien cette disposition,
If I understand this provision properly, this will place the agency under the Financial Administration Act?
If I understand, could you repeat your question? I apologize.
this brings PPP Canada, or what, its new entity, under the provisions of the Financial Administration Act.
It was already under the provisions of the
But as a
Financial
crown.
Administration Act. So this just simply transfers it from the Minister of Finance over to the Minister
I
of
see.
Infrastructure and Communities.
Okay. In terms of, just a bit to follow up on my colleague, Mr. Greywall's question, in terms of discussions with the Minister of Infrastructure, or the Minister of Finance for that matter, in terms of infrastructure projects, the role of P3, even in its new incarnation, how will that evolve?
So I can start, and if you want. So this legislation, this proposed legislation, does not change anything with respect to P3 other than make it, moving it from the Minister of Finance's portfolio over to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities portfolio. So it does not make any other changes, and in fact, it actually maintains the same governance framework that it had. So there's no other changes in this legislation.
An external board of directors, for example?
We have that now, and they continue to exist. We are a legal corporate entity under the Canada Business Corporations Act, and that continues to exist.
Okay.
So we continue to govern ourselves that way. The only thing that changes is the chair of the board reports to a different minister when this legislation passes.
Et des discussions entourant une banque d'investissement en infrastructure, ça vous...
And these discussions pertaining to infrastructure, will they involve you?
You know, I think there are plans for Minister Sohi to come and speak to our board, so we look forward to having those discussions. At this point, we're sitting prepared.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. You're saying that this won't change much. You're just going to be seeing a transfer of the responsibility from one department to another. But it seems that there are things that are going to be changed. There's an article that says that PPP Canada Inc. might, with the approval of the Governor and Council, sell or liquidate all or virtually all of its assets. So it does seem to change the structure or the powers, in fact, of PPP Canada. So what's the logic in this clause? Might this, for example, allow public assets to be privatized? Could PPP or P3 Canada be privatized with the agreement of the government?
Of CDIC, these types of changes, the same changes as are in this legislation, could be done by the Order in Council, and this just preserves that exact same governance structure when it moves over to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. So it does not propose any changes. It is the exact same framework that then shifts over to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. So there's no proposals for change in this legislation in that regard.
Do you want to add something?
Well, I would just add that the P3 Canada Fund that is administered by PPP Canada invests in other levels of government procuring of assets, and so we don't hold any assets that are sort of infrastructure assets. We basically hold the cash that that support our commitments to those other level of government procurements that are underway.
Mr. Curl?
In fact, if there are no changes, as you say, there is nevertheless this clause being added to the Act itself. So I'd like to understand, if nothing is changing, why add a clause that sets out that with the approval of the Governor and Council, it can sell or liquidate its assets in whole or in part? If it doesn't change anything, I don't understand, because this seems to be a significant change.
And so in order to have the exact mirroring of the same governance structure when it is with the Minister of Finance, with the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, to have that exact mirroring, you need to include these clauses in the legislation.
Okay. You didn't have the mirroring before, is that what you're saying? It's
in the FAA already for a subsidiary that these types of things can be changed by orders in council. So as we change it over, as it's changed over to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities to mirror the same governance, it has been added into the legislation.
Une dernière question pour le changement par.
Final question. At 269.1, there's a change, and it says that the infrastructure minister can acquire the shares of PPP, may acquire, that's the text.
To be left to his discretion, but.
In order for, again, the shares to be transferred, this is sort of technical language, legislative language that needs to be included in legislation. It needs to be, and then that transfer can happen. So it allows for it to happen. It doesn't actually make the change.
Okay. Merci.
Mr. Sabera.
Just a type of clarifying questions for my own. Pre this amendment, the PPP Canada was not a Crown Corp, just a wholly owned subsidiary?
Previously, P3 Canada was a subsidiary of the Canada Development Investment Corporation, so it was a subsidiary. Now it will be its own parent crown. So they're both crowns, but one is a subsidiary crown, and the other is now it's a
it'll be a
parent crown.
parent crown within the Ministry of Infrastructure.
Correct.
Okay. That's it. Oh, no, if I can do a follow-up, that's fine. And just in terms of ease of facilitation within the infrastructure ministry in terms of rollout of infrastructure spending, there's no impact, I would estimate, in this change, just other than that's within the same umbrella.
So it will, I can let you answer part of that, Greg, but it strengthens alignment with what with the Crown Corporation's activities and the expertise and activities of the Office of Infrastructure Canada, but there should be no other changes in terms of the minister, so he's ministry.
With respect to us as a corporation, we are a corporation, we exist. Our appropriations continue to exist as they always have in main estimates. And we continue to govern ourselves appropriately. And this is just changing the board's reporting to a different minister.
Okay. And you made the comment earlier, and I forget which individual, so I apologize on that. That the assets currently, you just hold the cash that will be used when a project is undertaken where there's a federal component to the project.
Correct. We don't own any, I'll call them fixed assets, yes, this funding is in support of the construction of infrastructure assets. We don't hold any of those assets. We are a transfer payment organization that, in order for us to make our commitments to these projects, we have the cash, and that's the asset that we hold, other than some small working capital just to manage as a corporation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ouellette.
I was actually going to be doing some questioning along the same lines as Monsieur Caron. So I'm actually right now in the Jobs Growth and Long-Term Prosperity Act from 2012, and because what this Division 14 actually says is the Jobs Growth and Long-Term Prosperity Act is amended by adding the following after Section 209. So now I'm looking at Section 209, and actually, unfortunately, I can't seem to find this authorization parent Crown Corporation. Especially the Section 4. So, and I'd like to know then in relation to this Section 4, how many assets do you actually hold in P3? So, how much are we talking about that's allowed to be sold by the Governing Council?
So I'll start, and then
Sure.
Maybe my colleague can add to it. So in the 2012 Jobs Growth and Long-Term Prosperity Act, there is a small provision, as you have mentioned, with respect to P3 Canada. But P3 Canada was not, and so that is the change. That's where the changes in this legislation are being proposed. But P3 Canada was set up by order in council. It was not set up through legislation, and so you will not find legislation that governs P3 Canada. It does not exist. I don't know if you want to add to.
So as far as our assets that we have, we've received $1.4 billion in appropriations over the years, and we have committed little over 1.3 billion into 24 projects that are generating a little less than $2 billion in value for money in those projects.
So currently on your books you have 2.4 billion?
No, we have 1.4 billion in cash, and it's in support of commitments to 24 projects in the amount of little over 1.3 billion.
Such as the Barrie Water Treatment Plant?
Correct.
Okay. So why is there? It seems like a fairly large, group or corporation. Why was there no legislation before? And pardon?
The rails under an order of council. It's not a separate. It's
Like
not
for
separate.
instance, the CBC isn't there a CBC Act?
You have their own, yeah, but VIA doesn't. It's just weird anachronisms that happen throughout the government.
I hope when you come back, you'll be able to present us with some legislation that will be able to guide us in the future. You're no longer an anomaly in the future, and you can use your expertise to make it a reality. Anyways, thank you very much.
Any final points, Ms. Sheehy or Mr. Smith? Thank you very much, and we apologize for the number of times we asked you here, but we finally are done of all the divisions. And for committee members, so thank you very much, witnesses. For committee members, tomorrow we start clause by clause on this little bill at 11 o'clock, and we'll go till we're done after 3:30.
Wayne,
Meeting adjourned.
how are we dealing with veterans stuff?
Thank you.